Hi, I wanted to share this a relatively short video with you. It's about 12 minutes. It's me scraping away at a sculpture that I've been working on. It's a young girl with braided hair. There's another story behind it, but that's not what I want to relate to you. There's uh, what I wanted to point out to you that first is that there's a lot of things that we do that have an inherent risk with them. For me, it's um, cutting myself or not wearing a filter mask when I should be because I'm creating a bunch of dust, and then you end up with stitches, and I've got the scars to prove that, or you end up with an infection, a sinus infection, which you can't seem to get rid of because you did that. Paint is the same kind of a way. There are things that we do with paint that if we're not careful, if we don't wash our hands frequently, if we don't um, take precautions, the chemicals in some of the paints we use could be very harmful to us. Include something like arsenic or lead. There's less so of that in many colors today, but still there are chemicals even in our modern um, spectrum of colors that are dangerous, and think of mineral spirits are also that way too. They can um, cause serious harm to us. Um, so you want to be careful about that. The next thing I wanted to do was to kind of show you this sculpture that I'm working on. I've been working on for a little bit. This is made of an epoxy resin. It's a two-part epoxy resin. And it's called Magic Sculpt. I like this particular product because it's easy to work with. You build it up around an armature. It works a lot like clay does. Um, but it can be expensive, and so you have a lot of you try to put together a lot of material, filler material around an armature when you work with it, and it still ends up being a bit on the heavy side, so it feels like a good solid material, and it does endure outdoors fairly well. I've got a sculpture that's sitting outside of my front door that has been doing really well wintering, and so I have a lot of optimism for this particular product. I also have some cement that I plan on sculpting with. I'll show you some more about that later. But you can see that what I'm doing here, I'm working with a particularly sharp carving knife you would normally use on wood, but it seems to work well just fine with the epoxy resin. But the trick here is you've got to be careful. You can see how I reinforce some cuts with the thumb of my left hand. I'm also wearing a glove that's really I bought for the purpose of working with stained glass on, but it has it provides a margin of error in case I should slip, which is, you never know what's happened. Um, I've got the scars and the stitches, I think, make good stories. We could talk about that sometime. You'll notice that as I'm working on this, I'm turning it. I'm looking at all different sides of it. I'm trying not to focus on one particular feature. The nice thing about the Magic Sculpt is that when you take material away, you can always mix up small amounts of new material or larger amounts of new material. You can add, you can subtract. You just give it time to dry, or work it when it's soft. I usually keep a little bowl of water so I can dip my fingers in it. It makes it a little easier um, to mold and push the clay around. I'll do the same thing with some of my sculpting tools. I'll get them wet and work with it when it's wet, because it can get kind of sticky in the beginning. But like all materials, what you do is you have to anticipate what their challenges are, and or learn what their challenges are by doing, which is sort of my method, and then plan or anticipate what you might then do to compensate for it. Some of the things that I have to do when I come back like this is that molding with my fingers and with the tools that are available to me, details, undercuts in cloth, or some details like around the eyes, which were particularly important to me, or her mouth, can be missed, or they need to be tooled in order to kind of eliminate some of the rough little bits of grainy pieces that might stick out that you missed. Or so it's not just a matter of smoothing, it's a matter of tooling it and to try to improve it, to build the shape, to reinforce the shape, the mass of it. If you think about just smoothing something, then that's probably a mistake, because what you end up doing there is thinking more about the surface and not about the whole of it. So that's something for you to keep in mind, along with the aspect of hurting yourself or messing up. Now, what I'm picking up here is a cabinet scraper. It's one of several that I own. I use it for smoothing wood, but it works just fine with my sculpting material here. In fact, almost anything that you can think of can be used as a sculpting tool. You don't want to limit yourself. There are lots of possibilities. I do have a large rasp. The tools that I have that are sitting nearby, in addition to that carving knife, are very small rasps that can help to cut in some detail. They aren't as effective as I'd hoped they would be, but they've been good to have. The best time to use these tools is when you're trying to like go back and add refinement and detail that you weren't able to get earlier. The more that you can do when the clay is soft and malleable, the better. But we've talked about that, so you know what I'm talking about. Where I'm working now, this is my garage. I want to thank my wife Becky for sacrificing so much energy and time to help me get it together. We put in, we've got a nice lighting system up above, and I'll be using this area mostly for stained glass and odds and ends for framing, for building frames and special projects. You'll probably see me out here quite a bit more than what? I don't know. Just more. I guess more than nothing is still more, isn't it? So it's all good. This tape has been, this video that I've made has been edited from, I think, about hour and a half worth of working outdoors on this. So sculpting like painting can become very absorbing. Even though for an hour and a half, pretty much I'm doing just what you see here. Just picking at details and contemplating what what I may need to do next. I wanted to make sure, you can see me kind of cutting in and around her eyes. I wanted to make sure that I get that lid and its placement and next to her nose right. And I did forget one time to, well, more than one time, to wear a filter mask when I was using my rotary tool on my sculpture. But a Dremel works really well if you need to grind away some material and make some refinements. Just be sure that you cover your nose and your mouth. And that's about that. See you later.